What's shaking BookTube? My name's Cam. Welcome back to another video. I have a pretty exciting one for you today. This video is for anyone who is thinking about starting BookTube or AuthorTube, or maybe you're already doing AuthorTube/BookTube videos, but you're wanting to pick up your game a bit. This one's for you, and not only that, but this video is also a collab. Today I will be joined by the YouTube channel iWriterly to bring you some tips and help and advice on what can help your BookTube/AuthorTube channel shine. We're going to tell you what can make your channel really pop. As mentioned, I'll be joined by the YouTube channel iWriterly for this one to help bring you some advice and some tips. iWriterly is another YouTube channel that specializes primarily in writing advice, so if you are an aspiring writer and writing tip videos is something you enjoy, then check her out. I'll leave her link in the description below. Tip number one is research what BookTube/AuthorTube actually is. I could make a whole video explaining that, but essentially AuthorTube is a branch of BookTube, and the best way to get information on either of those, or to find out how they're run, or the type of videos you should be making, or the general look that is attractive to an audience for BookTube and AuthorTube, just watch the popular ones. There's a lot of popular BookTubers and AuthorTubers out there, so no matter which one of those you're going to go for, you've got plenty of reference material. And that goes for if you are just wanting to make BookTube videos, if you're just wanting to make AuthorTube, or if you're wanting to make a mix of both. Knowing the differences between the two is pretty easy. BookTube is essentially any videos about reading and books in general, whereas AuthorTube is more on the writing side of things. And that's not just books, that includes poetry and non-fiction, etc. Watch the popular ones, that's all the reference material you need.
Although you don't necessarily need high-end equipment to start a YouTube channel of any kind, it could be AuthorTube, BookTube, or any other one, it is important that you're able to be seen and heard. Because of this, I think it's really important that you have good lights, a microphone, and a tripod. You can get fancy schmancy and get all the super cool kinds, but I really don't think that's necessary. I think our lights cost like $60. I know some authors will rely on natural lighting, and so they'll film on the days that it's sunny out and they're in front of a window, but that is a little hard to rely on if you have kind of wonky schedules or don't know when you'll be recording, which is why I always recommend getting nice lights. As far as how you're recording the video, I would say a smartphone is more than enough for most of the time, though a lot of booktubers and authortubers do tend to purchase a camera. You can of course get a camera if you're able to financially do so, but if you're on a tight budget, that might be where you can skimp and instead get lights. As I mentioned before, the important part is that you are seen and heard.
Next up, you want to select your video editing software, and this is a little bit more complex. It's a bit more subjective because this depends on your budget. Me personally, I use Premiere Pro, but I've said it a million times, it is definitely not necessary. In fact, I used a much cheaper option called Filmora for the first year on BookTube, and the differences between those videos and these ones is very slight. And aside from that, there's a lot of free options as well. It just depends on how creatively you want to edit your videos. But if you can afford a little bit, I would probably suggest starting off with Filmora and then working your way up to Premiere Pro if you haven't got any experience in editing videos. But if it's just you in front of the camera talking with only cuts or without any cuts at all and no actual editing, then just get a free one. You don't need anything else. Chances are your PC or your iMac, whatever the Apple comparison is, I don't use Apple, but whatever computer you use, chances are there's a free software already in there that you could start off with.
A lot of creators on YouTube will tell you that you have to post one video per week on your YouTube channel if you want to increase your rankings on YouTube's algorithm, but I don't think that's necessarily mandatory. I think the most important part is that you're consistently posting content. Most people do post weekly, so other people post a couple of times a week or maybe every other week. I know when we started the channel, we did it once a month. However, I will say as soon as we started posting videos weekly, our subscriber count went up much more quickly.
This one's an easy one, and that's having free music for the background of your videos. Something else that's quite subjective. It depends. I like to have music in the background of my videos just as a little bit of a layer. I just feel like it's a bit too stark if it's just me talking in videos like this. But then with that said, there's a lot of creators who don't use music in the background of their videos, and you hardly notice the difference. It's really not that big of a deal. But say you do want to put music in the background of your videos, the very first thing you need to be aware of is that you cannot make it too loud. This is a massive mistake I made when I started off. I had it almost level volume with me speaking, so that my talking voice was only just louder than the music, and you don't want that. The music needs to be just audible in the background so that they can hear that it is music and not just noise on the street, but also not so loud that it's distracting. The way I normally check is I take the headphones out and I put it to a volume just where I can hear me talking and I shouldn't be able to hear the music. As for where to find the music, that's really easy. You can just put in copyright-free music into the YouTube search bar and it's going to come up with like a million channels that do that. Or even better, in the YouTube creator dashboard, you can actually find a section that will link you to a massive library of free music, and it all works. Just make sure, no matter what option you go with, you're checking the credit requirement, because some of them might require that you put a little bit of a link or something like that in the description of every video that you use that music in. One last thing I want to mention with music as well is maybe try to use some music that other people aren't using heavily, because I'm sure you can already think of, like, I think there's about 3 songs that you'll hear in almost every booktuber's background music, and I personally find it irritating. Maybe other people don't, but I won't say much more, except that you know them when you hear them. They're usually the ones with whistling in them.
I always like to give myself a starting point, so I will look at other AuthorTubers and BookTubers channels to see how long their videos often are. You'll also probably want to look at your YouTube dashboard to see how many people watch your videos and for how long and where they start to drop off. I'd say most creators for AuthorTubers and BookTubers are somewhere around 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less, but whatever it is, just make sure that your content is engaging the whole time and you give the viewers a reason to stick around for the end.
Next up is the backdrop, and this is something that I've only recently, well, kind of recently, put some real effort into, and that is having something in the background that is not too distracting but is also a bit more interesting than just having a blank wall. And the good thing about BookTube and AuthorTube is that there's a pretty easy standard, and that's just in front of a bookcase. If you're planning on making BookTube videos, I think it's fair to say that you probably have a collection of books already. Just plop yourself in front of those. Really, the background isn't such a big factor. You don't need the lights, all that kind of stuff. That's just something you can look into incorporating further down the road if you want to up the production value, but when you're starting, it is really not important. There's massive creators on BookTube and AuthorTube that are still recording just in the middle of their living room with ordinary furniture in the background. It's hard to make mistakes when it comes to the background, except when it comes to having it looking too distracting. You don't want too much going on back there. You don't want a whole ton of bright, colorful shit that people are going to be watching in the video instead of you. I've done that before, and that's something I actively steered away from.
If you're not Photoshop savvy, consider signing up for the free service called Canva. I believe it's canva.com. They have a lot of different templates that you can choose from, but one of them is YouTube thumbnails. Once you're done recording a video, make sure to take a picture of yourself rather than take a still of yourself from during the video, because I don't know about you guys, but I am never cute when you click pause. So it's nice to have yourself making a silly face or smiling or whatever, and then having space to the side next to you for when you're editing your thumbnail. And that space is so that you can put big readable text that is either verbatim of your YouTube video title or maybe a slight tweak of that. It's really important that these thumbnails are readable and eye-catching.
This one's a bit of a weird one, and that's transcribing your videos. It's the little CC captions that you'll see when you're watching a YouTube video. When you're watching this one, just look down to the bottom and you should see a little thing that says CC. If you click that, it'll bring up captions. It should say what I'm saying, hopefully. And this isn't something you actually really need to do anything about. I mean, you don't need to write them out yourself, although you can, because the system that identifies you're talking and turns it into writing is actually pretty good, I've found. It's almost always accurate, but if you have the time though, I would recommend when you're rewatching your video during the final upload stage of putting videos on YouTube, maybe just watching it back with the captions on, so that you can make sure all the words are actually correct, and if they're not, you can just correct the little bits as you go. It may seem like a small nothing, but for the hearing impaired, it might actually make a really big difference, so it's worth putting some time into.
Be sure to give the viewers a snapshot of what they can expect to see in the video, along with any relevant links to things that you referenced in the video, and all of your social media channels and website links in the description. You want to make it as easy as possible for your viewers to stay in touch with you.
The last thing I want to mention in this video is monetizing. The big cha-ching. Or when it comes to BookTube and AuthorTube, the small and, if not non-existent, cha-ching. Still want to make videos? Cool. So there's a whole lot of new guidelines around monetizing on YouTube. There was a whole drama a little while back, especially for smaller channels, because they've kind of upped the ante on what you need to achieve before you can monetize your videos. But let's say you hit that mark. The first thing you need to know is that you're not going to make a living off this, especially not anytime soon. Even the biggest creators like Polar Banana Books or Jesse the Reader, those type of people, they are the most subscribed people essentially on BookTube, and yet they aren't rich. You're not going to really get, it's just very unlikely that you're going to get rich off BookTube and AuthorTube, so you need to accept that before you go into this, because if you go into this just hoping to make a living off this, you're probably going to end up giving up 3 months down the line and feeling like you've wasted a lot of time. But if you're cool with that, you've hit the mark for monetizing, go ahead. The only thing I would say is don't go too crazy with it. I mean, as far as mid-rolls go, some booktubers do that. I prefer not to, and I prefer it if videos I'm watching don't, but putting one in there should be fine, just don't put more than one. I mean, personally, it wouldn't bother me too much, but a lot of people are going to see that as you trying to do a bit of a money grab, and it's just not worth the negative attention. Like I said, you're not going to make a lot of money off this at all. I mean, a video with a couple of thousand views would get me only like, I think, $5 or something. It's not a big deal, and it simply can't be the reason you do this. Anyway, that's it. Big thanks to iWriterly for joining me on this one, for collabing so that we could bring you some advice on starting a BookTube or AuthorTube channel. Make sure you check out the link in the description below so you can go watch the second half of this video over on her channel, where I will also be, for a bunch more AuthorTube/BookTube tips that are going to help you make sure your channel is as good as it can be right from the get-go. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Catch ya.